Okay, we want to graph problem number 14 from section 1.7 in ALEKS. We have a piecewise function. Piecewise function means a function that has multiple equations. So I have one function is x to the power 2 minus 1, but this function is good for x's that are less than or equal to 1. So from here all the way to infinity for these x's, I will have that graph. For x's that are bigger than 1, I will have another graph. So for x's that are bigger than 1, for this side of 1, right-hand side of 1, I will have this graph. The top graph, x to the power 2 minus 1, is a parabola. So for x's that are less than 1, I will have a parabola. For x's that are bigger than 1, I will have a line. So you should do the work on a piece of paper, watch the video on how to pick the points. We have x squared minus 1, which is a parabola. The vertex is going to be at x is 0, y is negative 1. Look at the transformation. And then the graph is upward because x to the power 2 is positive. So I will have a parabola. I have to place the vertex. The vertex is going to be not here. This is 0, 0. But the vertex should get shifted down to negative 1 because of this negative 1 up here. The vertex should shift to negative 1, 0. Then it says choose how the curve opens. It opens up. So then you click on, above the negative 1, 0, you click so the graph stays upward. Then I want to cut part of this graph. So to cut the part of the graph, I need another point. So placing another point, that means, for instance, find your y-intercept. To find a y-intercept, you set the equation equal to 0. You set x squared minus 1 equal to 0. You solve for x. You add 1 to both sides. You get x squared is 1. You square root both sides. You get x is positive, negative, the square root of 1, and the square root of 1 is 1. So 1 point would be here. So I have 2 points. But I don't want the entire graph. I want this blue graph for x's that are on the left of 1. For these x's up to this point, I want this graph. So I want to erase this portion of the graph for x's that are bigger than 1, and I want to get rid of it. So I go to cut it, but it says, where do you want me to cut? I have to tell it where to cut it from. So I'm just going to use this point again because that's where I want the cut to happen, from 1, 0. So I type 1, 0. Why did I put 1, 0? You should always use this endpoint, which is 1. Substitute it here. 1 to the power 2 is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. So that's how I know this point is 1, 0. So I want the graph to be cut from 1, 0 to here. So you put it, then you go grab the eraser and erase the part you don't want. I'm going to put the other line now, because the equation for x's that are bigger than 1, these are x's that are bigger than 1. I want to have the line. So I'm just going to go and get this line. And I have to place 1 point and another point. So I need to put 2 points for the line. The first point is going to be here. Because again, you always substitute these endpoints. 1 here to find the endpoint for the quadratic. Put 1 here for 3x minus 3 to find the point for the linear graph. So you substitute 1 here. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 minus 3 is 0. So 1 point is going to be here. X is 1, y is 0. You need 1 more point. Your other point should be picking 1 more point for x's that are bigger than 1, such as 2. Pick a point 2. Put 2 here for x. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 take away 3 is 3. So when x is 2, y is 3, click the other point. But remember, I don't want this end of the line. I can't have this graph and the parabola at the same time. I have to get rid of this portion. So I go for cutting it, but it says, where do you want to cut it from? I want to cut it from this point again, 1, 0. I put 1 and 0 and plot it, and then I go after the eraser and erase the part I don't want. And that is my graph. So let's check it. And the answer is correct. So let's do another one. This time we have x squared minus 4. The endpoint is 2. So one point is going to be the vertex. And to find a vertex, because we have a quadratic equation, subtract 4. The vertex is going to be at 0 for x, y is negative 4. So I click on parabola. I shift it to here, 0, negative 4. Since I have positive x to the power 2, the graph is upward. So just move the cursor up and click so that it keeps the graph upward. It says place another word, another point. Another point I told you previously, you can use the x-intercept, but also is better to be consistent since we need this point. Just put this 2 in this equation. Plug in 2 for x, you get 2 to the power 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 take away 4 is 0. So it gives me 2, 0. So that's my other point. Now this is my graph for the top piece of the function. I have to graph the bottom piece too. But the top piece is not complete because I have this graph for all the x's. I want this graph for x's that are less than 2. I don't need this part. I have to get rid of that part. To get rid of that part, I have to cut it. When I say cut it, it says, where do you want me to cut it from? I want to cut it from this point, the point 2, 0. So I say 2, 0 should be, that's the cutting point. Then I go to the eraser, I take it here and I erase it. Then I just want to graph the other piece. The other piece is a linear equation. I put 2 for x, 2 times 2 is 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. So that's 1 point. I need one more point. I know he's going to ask me for one more point. So my other point would be one more point. I pick an x bigger than 2, such as I pick 3. I put 3 here. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 take away 4 is 2. So remember, 1 point was I substituted 2 for x. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. So I have the point. X is 2, y is 0. Then I need one more point. I put a point bigger than 2, like 3. I put 3 here. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 minus 4 is 2. So I have 2 points. I go and click on the line, 2, 0. The other one is 3, 2. 3, 2, that's my other point. But I have to go and erase this part, the bottom part. So I go and cut. Where do I want to cut it from? Again, I want to cut it from 2 and 0. That was one of my points. I take the eraser and then I go and erase that part. And that is how you graph these guys. So let's go and graph one more. We want to graph this one. So for this one, we have 3 p's for this piecewise function. We have a constant function. Negative 4 is considered a constant function because you have y is equal to negative 4. Negative x is y equal to negative x. We call that a linear function because the graph will be a line. The graph of negative 4 is going to be a line, but the graph for negative 4 is just going to be a horizontal line, a line this way. Negative x is going to be a line like that. The square root of x minus 1 is also going to be a square root function or square root graph, and the graph is an arc, that kind of graph, root function. Negative x is just going to be one of these lines, and negative 4 is also going to be a line. So let's graph them. from x that is between -4 and -2, I have this one. So let's see how we graph it. So let me go put this line. I want to graph it from -4x. Do you see this is -4x? I have a -4y. So when x is -4, y is also -4. Then when x is -2, this end is -2, y is still -4. So I get this point. I want to erase both sides, so I just go and say cut. Where do I want to cut? I want to cut from this. I put this point, this end, -4x and -4y. I want to cut from that end. So I go and take the eraser, I go and cut that. Then I want to cut this end too. So I go and say cut again. It says, where do you want to cut it from? I want to cut it from -2 and -4. So then I just go to eraser and I cut that part. We have to put some of these circles on each end. So I'm just going to go put this on this end here because it's open. There is no equal sign here, so you have to keep it open. This side also has, it's open, so I'm just going to go and click it here and put that open here too. So this graph is done. The first graph is done. The graph was -4, so I get this horizontal line, and its y is -4. For these x's, from -4 to -2, from x is -4 to x is -2, I just have this horizontal line. Now I want to graph y is equal to -x. I put this point for x, so I put -2 for x, -2 is going to give me +2. So one of the points for this graph is going to be when x is -2, y is +2. Write it down. Then I put x is 1. I substitute this end 1 in here. So I have a -1. When x is 1, y is -1. Write it on a piece of paper. So you substitute 1 in here. You have a negative. Negative times 1 becomes -1. When x is 1, y is -1. So that's another point. So let's graph that. So I'm just going to go get the line segment. I think line segment was better for the previous one too. Then I had to do less cutting. So I have when x is -2, y is -2. When x is 1, y is -1. X is 1, y is -1. That's this point. And then, do you see I have an equal sign on this end? So for the -2x, I am going to get a full dot. For this other side, for 1, since there is no equal sign, I'm going to have hollow dot. And that is that graph. I'm just going to go erase that because I don't know why it's putting these little cross around it. So let me go get my eraser and erase that and that and that. And I'm going to graph it again. I could, I think, get the pencil too, but let's just do the line segment for this one. If you remember, I had -4 and -4, and I also have -2 and -4. And then I have to put solid dot here. No, open dot for both ends. Open on this end, and again, open on this end. Now those crosses around it is gone, so that's better. So just use line segment for both of them. Now we want to graph this one for x's that are bigger than 1. So you must put 1 here, substitute this endpoint 1 here. 1 minus 1 is 0. So when x is 1, y is 0. So we go to this point and it says plot, place your first point. Our first point is going to be x is 1, y is 0. I click, place a second point. So to place a second point, pick another number. My recommendation is pick a number that you know is a square root. For instance, I will pick 5. Why do I pick 5? Because if I put 5 for x, I get 5 minus 1, which is 5 minus 1 is going to be 4, and a square root of 4 is 2. So that's why I pick 5. So I pick point x is 5, and then I get 5 minus 1 is 4, and a square root of 4 is 2. So my point is 5, comma 2. That's my second point. The question is, do I keep this open or closed? Because of this equal sign, I should get a solid dot and put it on the graph. This is your graph. Let's check our work. It says cut. For x is bigger than 1, I don't want to cut anything. Maybe let me do it again. So we get a line segment. For the first one, always put your endpoints, -4 and -2. X is -4 and x is -2. So when x is -4, we have y is -4. When x is -2, we have negative. Oh, I picked the wrong one. I want to pick line segment. So when x is -4, y is -4. When x is -2, y is -4. -4, and then I want both ends because there is no equal sign for these inequalities. Both signs are going to be open and open. Then I want to put another line segment for this one. When x is -2, again, you substitute -2 and +1 for x. If you put -2 for x, you get +2 for x. So when x is -2, y is +2. That's this point. And then when, oops, onto that one, line segment, when x is -2, y is +2. And when x is +1, y is -1. Maybe my graph was wrong before. I don't remember. I think I messed up here maybe. So x is -2, y becomes +2. When x is 1, y is -1. So that's this one. I have to decide about the end. The end point for -2, because of this equal sign, I should make it a solid dot. For x is +1, I have no equal sign here, so it should be a hollow dot. A hollow point. Next, I'm going to graph this one. I am going to substitute this endpoint 1 here. 1 minus 1 is 0. So when x is 1, y is 0. So I'm going to click on that and then put here 1, 0. It says placing second point. So second point, do you remember I told you pick 5? If I put 5 for x, 5 minus 1 is 4. A square root of 4 is 2. So for 5, I get 2. And maybe I have to put a dot here for this point. And again, that is incorrect because I put it in the wrong place. This is my equation. I should put it here. When x is 1, y is 0. I don't know why I put it at 2 and 0. And when x is 5, y is 2. That's my second point. I should put a solid dot at 1 and 0 because of that equal sign. And we are done. Okay, so that's how you graph it. Let's try another one. Again, we have for -3 to -1, we have -4. So this is just going to be a horizontal line at -4, but these are the points. Line segment. And when x is -3, y is -4. When x is -1, y is -4. So those are the two dots at -4y. We have this graph for x from -3 to -1. We just have this straight line, no equal sign, no equal sign. So both get hollow dot, hollow dot, hollow dot. Next, we are going to graph this one. We substitute -1 here. Negative, negative makes it +1. So when x is -1, y is +1. We substitute 4 here. When we substitute 4 for x, we get -4. So when x is 4, y is -4. So the other point is for a -4. So a line segment. When x is -1, y is 1. When x is 4, y is -4. We have to decide about the hollow or solid dot. For -1, we have solid. For +4, we have hollow. We have to graph this one, a square root function, but the square root function graph starts from 4. Remember, for this one, you need 2 points. One of the point is the end point. So you have to put this 4 here. 4 minus 4 gives you 0. So when x is 4, 4 minus 4 is 0, square root of 0 is 0. So when x is 4, comma 0, that's what you put. You need one more point. Another point is, for instance, just test it. Put 5, put 6, and see what numbers you get. You want to get a number that you know is a square root. So what good is it going to be if I put 6 here? 6 take away 4 is 2, and I don't know a square root of 2. So I go with 5. 5 take away 4 is 1, and a square root of 1 is 1. So if I go with 5 for x, I get 1 for y. So go with numbers that you know their square root. Another good number for this example would have been 8. If you substitute 8 for x, 8 take away 4 is 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. So both numbers, 5 and 8, are good options. 6, 7 are bad options. So you need those 2 points ahead of time. Go to square root function. You already know when x is 4, y is 0. That's one of your points. When x is 5, y is 1. That is your second point. You also have to decide about this endpoint, whether it should be hollow or solid. So because of that equal sign, we have to grab solid and then check your work.